The sun rose over the kingdom of Arendelle, painting the sky with pale gold and fiery red. In the small village at the edge of the forest, a young maid named Ilara woke to the sound of chickens clucking and the wind rustling through the trees. She stretched her tired arms and looked out across the fields she tended. Her life was simple, filled with hard work and quiet moments. She had no wealth, no title, and no family but her elderly grandmother. Yet in her heart there was a longing she could not name, a dream of something bigger, though she had never dared to hope it could reach her. News had spread across every kingdom far and wide. The Alpha King, ruler of Arendelle, had decreed that he would choose a bride from among 100 princesses, each from a different realm. The Alpha King was not only strong and wise but feared by all, for his power was unmatched and his will absolute. Every princess in the known world dreamed of being chosen, and the competition promised to be fierce. Ilara had never imagined that such a decree would touch her life. In her village, no one of common birth could ever think to stand before a king, let alone the Alpha King himself. That morning, the village square was quiet, but tension and excitement traveled even here. Travelers from distant lands brought whispers of the tournament, tales of princesses in sparkling gowns, trained in magic, swordplay, and diplomacy. They would come to Arendelle, each hoping to win the hand of the man who ruled all. Ilara listened, fascinated but distant. She did not believe someone like her could matter in such a world. Her days were for feeding animals, mending clothes, and helping her grandmother. The grandeur of kings and crowns seemed as distant as the clouds above. The kingdom's streets began to fill with glittering carriages. From the mountains to the seas, the princesses arrived. Their gowns shimmered like sunlight on water. Some wore armor adorned with jewels. Others carried staffs that glowed with faint magic. Their expressions ranged from pride to fear, but all were determined to claim the Alpha King as their own. Ilara watched from the shadows of the forest, curious, but she knew this was a world far from her own. Yet destiny, as it often does, has a way of finding the humble and the unnoticed. A royal messenger riding a white horse appeared at her village without warning. "Ilara," he said, bowing, "the Alpha King requests your presence. You are to compete in the selection." Ilara froze. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might leap from her chest. "Me?" she whispered. "But I am only a maid. I cannot—" "You have been chosen," the messenger said, his voice firm but gentle. "Do not question it. Prepare yourself. You leave with the dawn." Her grandmother clutched her hands. "Child," she said, her eyes wet, "your heart is pure. Perhaps that is why he calls for you. Go with courage." The journey to the capital was long and exhausting. Ilara traveled in a simple carriage, surrounded by glittering nobles and princesses who cast her curious, disdainful glances. None could understand why a poor maid would be present among them. They whispered, laughed, and plotted, believing that their wealth, skill, and magic guaranteed victory. When they arrived at the palace, Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. The palace rose from the earth like a dark mountain of gold and stone. Towers pierced the sky, and enchanted torches burned without flame, casting flickering shadows across the cobblestones. The air smelled faintly of magic, of flowers that did not exist anywhere else, and of power that hummed like a low song. The Alpha King appeared in the great hall, a figure tall and imposing. His dark hair fell to broad shoulders, his eyes sharp as a hawk's, but there was a loneliness in them too. He did not smile, but his gaze swept the room, assessing each princess. They bowed, curtsied, or attempted to charm him with words, tricks, or magic. Ilara stood at the edge, uncertain, her hands folded in front of her. She did not know how to bow with elegance, how to charm, or how to perform feats of power. Yet she did not shrink. The trials began the next day. Princesses demonstrated their skills, from sword fights that flashed like lightning to intricate displays of magic that made fire dance in the air. They laughed at Ilara's simplicity, mocking her plain clothes, her quiet manners, and her lack of training. But she did not falter. When called upon, she moved with honesty. She did not attempt to dazzle. She only acted with courage, kindness, and attention to those around her. One day, the trial was of courage. A mystical creature bound to the palace by magic roared and thrashed. The princesses tried to control it with spells and steel, but it rejected their efforts, sensing arrogance and fear. The creature seemed impossible to tame. When it turned toward Ilara, she did not raise a sword or cast a spell. Instead, she stepped forward gently, speaking softly, her voice steady. She reached out with her hands not to dominate, but to connect. The creature paused. Its eyes, deep and knowing, studied her. Then slowly it relaxed, leaning its head against her palm. The hall fell silent. Even the princesses stopped, staring in disbelief. The Alpha King himself stepped closer, a flicker of admiration in his gaze. For the first time, he saw not a competitor, but someone whose heart and spirit were different. As days passed, Alara continued to act with quiet bravery. She helped those who stumbled, spoke words of truth, and faced dangers that would have terrified even the bravest noble. She was not perfect, but her honesty and courage set her apart. Slowly, the Alpha King found his thoughts returning to her when she was not near, wondering how someone so ordinary could shine so brightly. The princesses, however, grew jealous and angry. They whispered lies, plotted tricks, and tried to humiliate her at every turn. Yet every attempt failed. The villagers' maid seemed to have a charm they could not break. Finally, the trial that would determine the next stage of selection arrived. The Alpha King summoned all the princesses and Alara to the forest beyond the palace, a place dark and enchanted, where few dared to tread. The task was simple yet perilous: retrieve a rare flower guarded by unseen magic and dangerous beasts. Many princesses fled, frightened by the forest's whispers and shadows. Others attempted to seize the flower by force and were met with painful failure. Alara walked carefully, listening to the wind, trusting her instincts. She moved with the forest, not against it, guided by her heart. When she reached the flower, it shimmered like moonlight, and she plucked it gently. But as she did, a shadow fell across her path, a creature of darkness, conjured by old magic to test the hearts of all who entered. Alara felt fear, but she remembered her grandmother's words. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to face it. She held her ground, speaking softly, and offered compassion instead of violence. Slowly, the shadow receded, leaving her unharmed. When she returned to the Alpha King, the hall was silent. Every princess watched, their eyes wide with envy and disbelief. Alara did not bow low or boast. She handed the flower to the king with a quiet, respectful smile. He took it and studied her, his face unreadable. Then, for the first time in the tournament, he spoke directly to her. "You," he said, voice low, "are not like the others." Alara's heart raced. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "You do not seek to impress or manipulate. You do not hide behind jewels or magic. You act with honesty and courage," he continued. "And that is rare," the princesses gasped. Some whispered angrily. How could a maid without title, skill, or wealth gain the king's attention over 100 royal competitors? The Alpha King's eyes softened as he looked at Alara. There was a storm in them, a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and a longing he had never admitted, even to himself. She had touched something deep inside him, something he had buried beneath crowns, power, and duty. As the sun set over the forest, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard, the king made a decision that stunned everyone. "Alara," he said, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. "Come to the throne room at dawn. I must speak with you alone." Alara's heart nearly stopped. She looked at the 100 princesses, their faces twisted with envy and fury. She felt a mixture of fear and hope, knowing that her life would never be the same. The world of crowns, power, and magic had opened its gates to her, and she had crossed the threshold without knowing what awaited. That night, she could not sleep. She walked to the small balcony of her room, looking at the dark mountains beyond the city. Stars glimmered faintly above, and the wind whispered promises she could not understand. Somewhere in the shadows of the great palace, destiny was waiting, and it had chosen her. Tomorrow she would face the Alpha King alone. And with that, the quiet maid who had never known privilege or power would step into a world of magic, ambition, and the impossible choice of a king. The moon rose over Arendelle, silver and cold, and the wind carried a whisper through the palace halls. Not all crowns are earned by birth. Some are claimed by the heart. The dawn came quietly over Arendelle. Pale light crept across the palace walls, glinting off towers and banners. The sound of bells echoed softly through the corridors, calling everyone to the Hall of Judgment, the place where the Alpha King would make his final choice. But while the princesses dressed in gold and silver, layering perfume and jewels, Alara stood alone by her window. She wore a simple gown of white linen. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the unknown. She was to stand before the Alpha King, alone, while the eyes of 100 kingdoms watched. When the guards came for her, she followed quietly. The corridors were long, filled with echoes of her soft footsteps. Every step reminded her she did not belong here, and yet, something deep within whispered that she was meant to walk this path. The throne room doors opened. The Alpha King sat upon his throne of black stone, its surface shining like a mirror. Torches flickered around him, casting golden light upon his strong features. His crown rested beside him as if even royalty bowed to his will. Yet his eyes were not cold that morning. When he looked at Alara, there was a gentleness that few had ever seen. "Alara," he said, his voice deep and steady. "You have faced every trial without armor, crown, or magic. You have shown strength not born of power but of heart." Alara bowed slightly, her voice quiet but firm. "Your Majesty, I never sought to impress. I only tried to do what was right." Her words echoed softly in the vast hall. The Alpha King rose from his throne, descending the steps until he stood before her. His presence was overwhelming, strong, commanding, yet his expression held something human, almost uncertain. "The princesses believe they deserve me because of their birth," he said. "But I have seen greed, pride, and fear in their hearts. You are different." Alara lowered her gaze. "I am no princess, my lord. I am only a maid." The king smiled faintly, though his eyes were distant. "Perhaps that is why you understand humility. Perhaps that is why the crown has chosen to notice you." Before Alara could answer, the great doors of the throne room opened again. The princesses entered, each more splendid than the last, their faces sharp with pride and anger. They bowed stiffly, glaring at Alara as though her presence was an insult to their bloodlines. The king turned to them. "The trials have ended," he said. "And I have made my decision." Whispers filled the air. Some gasped, others clenched their fists. One princess, bold and furious, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice trembling, "surely you cannot mean to choose her. She is nothing. A servant." The king's eyes hardened. "Be careful," he said, his voice like thunder rolling through the hall. "Value is not measured by gold or title. True worth lies elsewhere." The hall fell silent, but before he could declare his final choice, a sudden darkness swept through the palace. The torches flickered and died. A cold wind howled across the marble floor. The air turned heavy and shadows crawled across the walls like living smoke. From that darkness, a figure appeared, tall, cloaked in black, her voice soft yet filled with venom. "So, brother," she said, "you mean to break the curse at last?" The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Morgana," he said quietly. It was his sister, a sorceress who had once sought the throne for herself. Long ago she had cursed the royal bloodline, that no king could find peace through love unless his heart chose one pure of soul. If he failed, the kingdom would fall into endless storm. Morgana's smile was cruel. "You cannot escape fate. Even if you choose this maid, the curse will test her. If she fails, your kingdom will burn." Alara froze, her heart pounding. "What must I do?" she asked softly. The king turned to her, his expression full of pain. "You must face the trial of truth. It will show your deepest fears, your weaknesses. If you surrender to them, both you and I will be lost." Alara nodded slowly. "Then I will face it." The sorceress laughed, her voice echoing like wind through hollow stone. "So brave," she said. "Let us see if your courage survives when the heart breaks." With a wave of her hand, the floor split open. A whirl of silver light rose like a storm, pulling Alara inside. The king reached for her, but it was too late. She vanished into the trial. Alara awoke in a place that looked like her village, but everything was wrong. The sky was gray, the fields were dead, and her grandmother's house stood in ruins. She heard whispers, cruel, haunting. "You are nothing," they said. "You will never be enough. You will be forgotten." Tears burned her eyes, but she kept walking. She passed the broken well, the fallen trees, and saw her reflection in the water. Only it wasn't her. It was her wearing a crown, her eyes cold, her heart turned to stone. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "That is not who I am." The reflection smiled mockingly. "You wish to love a king? You will lose yourself. You will become what you hate." Alara knelt, closing her eyes. "I may be afraid," she whispered, "but I will not let fear decide who I am." The world trembled. The reflection shattered. Light broke through the gray sky, washing everything in gold. The voice of the Alpha King echoed faintly, calling her name. She reached for the sound and the world dissolved in light. Back in the throne room, the king stood surrounded by chaos. Storms raged outside. The palace walls shook. Morgana's laughter filled the air. "She will fail," she whispered. "No maid can survive what even queens could not." But the Alpha King closed his eyes. "You do not know her," he said quietly. "She has more courage than all your power combined." Then the light returned. Alara appeared in the center of the hall, glowing faintly, her face calm and steady. The curse mark on the floor cracked, releasing a bright golden light that filled every corner. Morgana shrieked and vanished into smoke. The storm outside broke and sunlight poured into the palace once more. Alara fell to her knees, exhausted. The king rushed forward, catching her before she could fall. "It's over," he whispered. "You have broken the curse." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with quiet strength. "I only did what I believed was right." The king smiled, a true smile, rare and soft. "And that is why I choose you." Gasps filled the room. The princesses stood frozen, their pride shattered. The king helped Alara to her feet and turned to the court. "Let it be known," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "that I choose Alara, daughter of no house, servant of no crown, as my queen. For her courage has freed not only me but this kingdom from its curse." The hall erupted with applause and disbelief. Some bowed, others wept. The ancient curse had been broken not by power or birthright, but by the heart of a humble maid. Alara looked around, still unsure if she was dreaming. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "why me?" The king's eyes met hers, deep and unguarded. "Because you saw me not as a king but as a man, and in that you gave me something no crown ever could, peace." He lifted her hand and placed it over his heart. "From this day you will not walk behind me or before me, but beside me." Outside, the bells of Arendelle rang once more, not in warning, but in celebration. The kingdom's skies cleared, flowers bloomed again, and the dark curse faded into legend. That night, when the celebrations had ended, Alara stood on the palace balcony. The stars were bright above her, the same stars she had watched from her little village. The wind carried the scent of rain and roses. The Alpha King joined her, his cloak rustling softly. "You could have turned away," he said. "Yet you faced everything without hesitation." Alara smiled faintly. "Maybe because I believed in you," she said, "even when I was afraid." He looked at her for a long moment, the moonlight touching his face. "Then let this kingdom remember," he said, "that love is not a gift for the powerful. It is a strength of the pure." And as the night deepened, the Alpha King and the maid who became his queen stood together in silence, their hearts calm after the storm. Far below, the people of Arendelle lit lanterns, sending them into the sky. Each light rose higher and higher, carrying a single message that the whole world would remember, that 100 princesses had competed for the Alpha King, but only the heart of a poor maid had been strong enough to win him.